majority of the state and municipal fire services are unable to enforce the fire safety provisions due to a lack of appropriate directives from the authorities controlling the function of fire services. The recent fires in Mumbai and the major fire disasters of India, including the Upahar tragedy in Delhi, the Carlton Towers fire in Bengaluru, and the AMRI fire in Kolkata all illustrate the nationwide risk it carries. It also demonstrates the inability to learn from lessons in providing a national response. We asked Mr. Davendra Kumar Shami with the National Disaster Response Force for his views.
We cannot depend upon the private fire services. As if you divide the total of work done by the fire services, you will see that some of the duties are attached with the implementation of Act, and we cannot depend on the private person to implement the statutory duties.
In an era of a highly competitive business environment, any interruption due to fire can be catastrophic, as it can bring a business to halt. By not addressing fire risks, there may be serious consequences for the production capacity of a business, and in the extreme cases, the business can be forced to shut down.
Hello and welcome to another episode of India Risk Report. And in this report, we are looking at specifically fire and safety and security of individuals and institutions and building infrastructure in India, which the figures and the statistics that are available with us do not send any message of confidence to all of us who are wanting to watch this very carefully. More specifically, when India is looking at attracting more and more international investment in India, is India truly safe for the investor? Is India truly safe for its business and investment community? Is India truly safe for its citizens? On an average, 51 deaths occur in India every day because of fire hazards. And to look at the issue of fire safety and security in India, we have two eminently qualified experts who have hands-on experience of the subject. We have Mr. S.K. Dheri, former head of the Delhi Fire Services and now the head of Fire Safety and Security with the DLF Group, which I'm told has taken some dramatic steps to ensure that fire safety and security is provided. And we have Professor V.K. Paul of the School of Planning and Architecture, who actually teaches the subject but is not very comfortable with the state of play in India today. Professor Paul, you had some observations about the number of people whose lives get lost or who get threatened by fire hazard. Can you sort of give us sort of top of the building view that why is this the case and why is India still not going to send a message of comfort to those coming from abroad who are used to far superior fire safety and security norms?
Thank you, Maruf. So two questions. One is, what is the overview of fire safety and what all is happening in terms of for the lives of people? Roughly about range of about 24,000 people dying every year on account of fire, which translates into something 50+ people dying every year. The capacity of firefighting woefully short, well recognized by the government in terms of various committees, and Dheri Saab has witnessed all those proceedings in various advisory bodies. As far as the education is concerned, very limited. Now all this of course doesn't come out openly in the public domain, but if you see what is happening in public domain in terms of the kind of incidents we have seen of fire in the recent past, whether it is a restaurant fire or a metro incident or Emory or any of these hospital fire recently, it doesn't send a message of confidence, the reliability of what we are. Imagine, remember, these are the buildings where you and I or anybody who is a responsible in the society would expect it to be a responsible place, but it doesn't send that kind of a message to the people.
So why does, Deri Saab, it doesn't send a message of comfort to people? Why is that the case? Is it because there is a huge shortage of firemen in the country? I mean, as per figures available to us, more than 96% of the people required as per the National Disaster Response Force and Civil Defense are short in terms of firefighting capability. There's a shortage of fire stations, there's a shortage of manpower, there's a shortage of firefighting and rescue vehicles. Now, clearly you have worn two hats. One is at the government level, today in the corporate sector. You were giving me to understand that things are much, much better in the private sector. So where does the shortage come from in the government sector? Is it just that you have a leadership at the top who are clueless and indifferent to doing what is minimum required for the people of the country, that everyone's just passing the buck, biding his time? In the corporate sector, I believe there are audits also, but in the government there are no audits worth the name. So,
yeah, very true, but let me explain you slightly the scenario and the subject of fire part of it, you know. See, the subject of fire happens to be a state subject, it's not a central subject, number one. Number two, strange are the priorities of the state from state to state, I would say, because the fire services are functioning directly under the local bodies, most of the places. Of course, the government of India had suggested them way back in 1957, a draft fire service bill was sent by them and said you kindly adopt this so that you can have a state level fire services and uniformity will come all over the country to have a fire services. But unfortunately, the act or the fire services were not taken over by the state government. Once the state government have started taking over, for example, I give you example of Delhi only. Delhi way back in 1984, we had only about 15 fire stations. Today we have 53 fire stations. You can see that the amount of growth which we had it in the number of fire stations and the number of personnel also who are doing that job. But the question comes, what was the population of Delhi way back in 1984, and what is the population now? Over and above that, about 40 lakh people keep on shifting to Delhi every day in the morning and go back in the evening, you know. So Delhi is already crossed over about 2 crore population as regards the Delhi is concerned. And when you see the total density of the population which is provided here, I think the highest density of any area, because the total area is around 1,484 square kilometer, and the density is more than 10,000 people per square kilometer, you know.
right. I won't go into those details, but Professor Paul, look at the case of states. Maharashtra alone, an audit revealed that 78% of the budget allocated to buying fire safety equipment and rescue vehicles across the state between 2010-2015, the budget was not used up, right? So on one side you say it's a state subject. On the other side, the money, even if it's given to the state, they don't use up. Linked to it is another factor, which is the challenge of training fire personnel. That's where somebody like you comes in, the challenge of training fire personnel. Now, do you only train fire personnel when somebody has signed a document and said that I want to join the fire services? Why can't we incorporate more public-private partnerships for training of people? As you know, another, it's like medical first aid. You have an emergency response mechanism in place by training people so that people can at least react to basic issues when they come up.
See, there is a budget. I can make the budget available to you. Fundamentally, if you do not have a capacity to use that budget, where are you going to use it?
Why? What about the capacity to buy equipment?
You buy equipment, but where do you bring these trained firemen and the fire personnel? In this country, there's one professional fire college, Nagpur Fire College, that you would vouch for. Other than that, there are few training institutions. They're producing only lower level the firemen and that kind of people, and that the output is woefully short. But if you look at the deployment of these people on field, yes, there are increase in numbers over a period of time, but if you leave all that aside, how has the number of deaths because of fire have been controlled? If you look at the graph in last 10 years from say 2006 or whatever the data is available, the 22,000 odd people, it consistently maintains even 22,000, 24,000. Delhi, 300 to 400 people dying every year. So new codes.
So what's the solution? What's the solution?
So the solution is that you have to innovate. You mentioned about a very nice issue about the state issue, and Delhi Sahab also mentioned. Now, there's a Motor Vehicles Act. There's a Central Motor Vehicles Act. This is how you drive. But the states operate in their own way. So why can't there be one uniform framework on the baseline of fire safety acceptance in our built environment? And then the states, from their requirement, they work it out.
So that's a very good point raised by you, that by saying it's a state subject, you cannot at the national level absolve yourself of responsibility.
Absolutely not.
You have to define it further, that while the states will have their independent way of implementing,
within that framework,
the framework and the terms of reference have to be given. At that very interesting point, we need to go in for a break, but after a break we'll come back as to what other measures that we need to take speedily to address this real challenge to India's economy, its people and its security. But that after a break. Welcome back. We are continuing to look at fire safety and security challenges to India and its society, its business and its infrastructure, and we continue to have our two distinguished guests with us. I go back to you, sir, Mr. Deri. You have experience in both fields with the government and now head of with the fire services in DLF. But there is, what do you find are the big differences between how the government operates and how the corporate sector operates? And the second thing is that, do you feel that things didn't move fast enough at the government because of shortage of funds, or did you feel that there was a lack of understanding at the top leadership level that we need to speed up this process?
See, let me make it very clear to you, as there's no doubt about saying that the process of finalization, taking decision in corporate sector is much quicker and faster, you know.
Right.
I remember when I basically proposed the DLF, you know, for setting up 3 fire stations of their own. It took them at about 2:30 I sent the note, and our chairman had approved everything. By 4:30 I got a message back that we go ahead with it and provide that fire station. Now, if it was the same procedure, I had to go to the government of India, it would have gone to 110 tables of different finance ministry and home ministry and whatnot, and finally they would have raised 110 queries, and it would have taken 2 years, 3 years before I could get the okay from them. You know. So let's be very clear about it.
But
I worked in a government
interject?
department.
You know, please clarify this notion of what is the top. The fire safety in this country for last 50, 60 years is such an important issue, something like 200 Boeings crashing equivalent, and we cannot even define who the top is which will take decision.
Well, that's the hallmark of
That's
the
the
bureaucracy.
problem.
That's
so
the
if you
hallmark of the
go
bureaucracy.
and get some support and want some decision or some clarification or some policy, where do you go?
Paul Saab, that is the hallmark of bureaucracy. That the buck will not stop at his table; it will keep going around, so that you
people will
cannot
continue to
you cannot
suffer.
ever nail them, and they are just basically passing the file around. But let's go back to the subject again.
Now, the question is that once we set up the fire station and the art of firefighting equipment which we proposed and we acquired it, we were the first one in the country to have that sort of equipment. Nobody in the state government had ever had that sort of equipment, number one. Number two, today we have almost about 253 qualified fire officers working in DLF complexes around the clock, you know. Number three is that we are getting the audit done from international parties and from the reputed auditing body from internationally, where we spend a lot of money on that and make sure that all the compliances with regard to safety is concerned, and we are doing much more than what is prescribed in the book.
Okay, I mean that's good advertising for DLF, but Professor Paul, I want to ask you now, based on your study of all statistics that are available, two quick questions. One is that out of the 8,559 fire stations that the Home Ministry itself says this country should have, we have only 2,087, so less than 1/4. The second thing is, here we've just been educated that DLF's got 253 firefighting officers. So there's no shortage of people wanting to come forward and take this responsibility. What did you find in your studies is a reluctance or the reluctant factor in people coming forward to join this force? Why are we short of people?
One is that we have still not rolled out a mindset that fire safety or that kind of a support can be created within through a private setup, say for example Delhi Greater Clash. So why can't the local setup, they themselves can manage a few things? And I believe long time back in Amritsar, you may correct if I'm wrong, Vyapar Mandal actually had some of the Vyapar Mandals, they had their own firefighting arrangements.
So do you attribute this to the lack of initiative on the part of the private sector, or do you attribute it to the fact that the government likes to control everything and therefore till Sarkari permission is given, you cannot get anything?
Can I clarify on that issue?
Yes, sir.
It's very interesting what Professor Paul raised the issue, and all over the world it is like that. Fighting fire is not only the job of the fire brigade people, it's the job of every individual also.
Very true.
Now, once you are setting up a huge complex in an industry and all that, if you have set up your own fire station, it may cost you very little money in comparison to the total plant and the layout, etc. And if you start taking and maintaining that fire station, you are 100% sure that you are not at all going to be failure, because if any incident takes place, the unit is right placed in your own complex.
So why can't they create it there? If I'm prepared to spend something like 500 crores, why can't I spend 0.5 crore, 1 crore and create a setup of assurance for my own self? I'll just give you an example.
But that is a general prevailing attitude towards security. That, I will look after my VIP guests by flying them first class, by putting them up in best of hotels, have big launch parties. But when it comes to security, you hire a chief security officer and you tell him, ki, boss, here you have a deal. You either take your salary, or with the same amount, I create a security infrastructure.
No, and if you have a VIP or any such high profile event or something, then you borrow a vehicle from DFS and place it there. And that's how you create a sense of...
No, I think there also the slight change has come in, Incident what happened in Bombay recently,
Kamla
which is nowadays Kamla, mill part of it, it's being circulated all over, We had similar accident in way back in 80s in Delhi, where we had a birthday party where we lost 22 people in that. After that, we had laid down the guidelines and we said we will not allow any big function to be organized in tentage and all that unless and until you have a fire tender and you have the clearance from everybody, then only. And we gave the guidelines to the municipal corporations and the committee, and with that, now number of private people are owning the fire engine who can, people can hire them and they are standing on the spot with the crew. So that anything goes wrong, they can handle it on the sport.
No, I also came across a very interesting example of somebody who's created a fire sort of reaction vehicle on a motorcycle. Because how do you put a tender into a small gully? But a motorcycle can go there.
So we need to innovate. We need to innovate.
No, but we already are using this sort of vehicles, in Delhi Fire Service has a huge fleet of that. Similarly, in Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, they have already gone for motorbike because for all congested area, this concept came from Hong Kong only,
Right. No, so therefore my question to you, sir, as an academic, do you study very carefully the international norms, the international experience, and how much is that incorporated into your lessons learned in your curriculum and enforcing it upon people to go by the best practices?
You see, continuing with what Derisa was saying and what your question is, you see, internationally, if there are difficulties in access to the city areas, like all historic cities or old cities where the large vehicles cannot go, either you bring down the size, smaller jeeps, smaller vehicles. Himachal and all, hill stations, they always have smaller vehicles. And or you have your own hydrants, those water points available inside the city everywhere. Maintain them. What difference? It's like the same building, instead of vertically making water available, horizontally within the city, you spread it and maintain them.
But do you agree, sir? Is that more easily said than done, isn't it?
No, it has existed.
Okay.
No, let me tell you. Simla Municipal Corporation water supply is considered to be one of the most intricate and the best for firefighting purposes, because I remained for 18 years in Himachal. We have never used pump for fighting a fire, because by change of the wall only, we used to get by gravity fed so much pressure that we could fight it comfortably. Yes, there are certain small trolleys, hand-held cart, which we used to carry down below if it is deep in the area.
How much do you attribute that to the British influence, because it was the summer capital?
It is all British times only. The whole thing has been left by them only.
Yeah, but so therefore, what modern India we are creating, the glass houses everywhere, the big buildings we are creating, and showcasing that this is the shining modern India. Is the shining modern India going to survive the next big fire attacks?
Well, if the systems are not maintained properly, because people in India, what they are doing, they are getting only NOC. For NOC, they are providing system. Once the NOC has been given by the department, they have got the occupancy, they are not bothered about maintaining it. If it is not maintained, I keep my finger crossed, because I still remember Institute of Advanced Studies in Himachal Pradesh. Sprinkler system was installed in 1889 and is still functioning till today also.
Well, on the lessons that are emerging from all this, the wisdom is there.
Absolutely.
But the will is a bit less
lacking
in terms of wanting to implement all the good practices that we know that can be implemented in India. There are some examples. Shimla has often come up here in the discussions. But more importantly, I think what we need is today the involvement of all the stakeholders in the purpose of providing us cities and urban areas and even rural areas which are going to be safe from fire hazard. And it has to be the collective will, the collective experience and the collective wealth of everybody that has to go in, because you can have buildings worth hundreds of crores, but it can go up in smoke, as we have just noticed with the Kamla Mills disaster. But every few years we have a disaster, we are reminded, and unfortunately the attitude is very soon it's all forgotten and it's business as usual. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us. It's been extremely enlightening, and I think those who are watching this program would learn the lesson of, most importantly, the need for public-private partnership and not waiting for the government to come and bell the cat. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.